Welcome to the New School of Marketing podcast, the place for smart, simple strategies that will amplify your business results. Sharing practical tips, insider knowledge, and actionable advice because marketing is something that every business owner can do. Now, let's get started. Introducing your host, Bianca McKenzie, mum, lover of snow sports, camping, horse riding, and in-demand launch strategist and Facebook advertising knowledge bank.
Welcome to the New School of Marketing podcast. I'm Bianca McKenzie, and today I'm talking about getting more done by eliminating brain fog with biohacking with Tanessa Shears. Tanessa Shears is a kinesiologist, certified sleep science coach, health consultant, and host of the Becoming Limitless podcast. She helps entrepreneurs scale their business by optimizing their health, focus, and productivity with science and biohacking. Tanessa works closely with business owners to implement effective sleep, nutrition, movement, and out-of-the-box stress management strategies so they can eliminate brain fog and wake up feeling well-rested, energized, and focused. She optimizes the performance capacity of your body and brain using a combination of wearable technology and coaching so you can produce more impactful work output and scale your business faster. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, super exciting. All right. I'm literally going to dive right in because I'm super curious to know more about all of this brain fog and biohacking and things like that. So what is brain fog and what causes it?
Yeah, brain fog is an interesting one. It's like a collection of symptoms. So it's not necessarily something that you can like stroll into your doctor's office and they'll be like, oh, you have brain fog. It's more so like a collection of symptoms that we've all experienced, but never been able to put our finger on what was going on. It's that sense of just waking up with low energy that kind of sustains throughout the day. And there's just overlying fatigue, maybe even like you're getting those afternoon energy crashes during the day when you're trying to, stay focused and get work done. You're feeling really easily distracted. Like every time a notification goes off or you get this urge to check Instagram and it's hard to stay focused and get done what needs to get done. And your thinking just feels really clunky or cloudy. Like I know when I've experienced brain fog, it'll show up as I sit down to write like a marketing email newsletter and I'll feel like I don't have any creative ideas or I don't know where to start. Or when I do get writing, it takes me like twice as long. And I notice that my brain doesn't feel very sharp. So that is the definition, like what we look at as symptoms when we're looking at brain fog and how it affects our businesses.
That's so interesting. And yes, I can definitely recognize that. I was actually thinking back to my corporate days and it used to happen around 3:00. I'd be like, this slump where, I don't know, I just had to get like nothing urgent or important done because I wouldn't have the energy for it. And it still happens. And we were just talking a little bit about this, but at the moment, obviously it happens because new baby who's asleep on my lap right now. So I think I would have it, but I'm just trying to, connect back to when I didn't have the baby that would wake me up at nighttime. I always thought that you kind of have your productive time and you have your downtime, but there might be something more at play. What do you think?
I think there's definitely times where our brains are meant to be more productive. And it's interesting. It actually depends on something that's called our chronotype. So chrono meaning time and how our bodies function relative to time, because we all actually have a gene that determines whether we are more of an early morning person or we are more of a late night person, or we kind of have a schedule that sits in the middle. And our most productive hours definitely are determined by when our brain is optimized for productivity based on our chronotype pretty much. So for example, if you are a person that is geared to wake up at 5:30 a.m. in the morning, your brain turns on, your best work is usually going to be between like 7:30 and 9:30, right? So there is that natural drop off in like highly productive work. But I think there's that difference between brain fog in which we're just not getting anything done. And we're kind of just, when you like will pass 3 hours and you got done like one thing and you're like, how did it take me that long to do that? So I think there's a difference between delegating that time for maybe less high performance tasks like email checking, or maybe we're, designing in Canva versus the stuff we want to have in the morning, which might be like the copywriting or, developing a masterclass outline, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so what really causes the brain fog?
Yeah, brain fog is caused by inflammation that's happening in our body. And we all know inflammation. Like if you think of if you've ever sprained your ankle and it's red, it's swollen, fluid accumulates, there's an immune response that actually happens inside of our body as well. And can happen in our digestive tract, and it can happen in our brain. So when we have inflammation in our body, whether that be from what we're eating, whether that be from a lack of quality or long enough sleep, or whether that be from stress that's gone unchecked, it creates inflammation in our body. And that's what leads to the brain fog.
Wow. So how does it, I'm just trying to think about how to best formulate it. How does it affect how we run our business and marketing? But and I'm not talking like on a day-to-day, because I don't know. I think we all sometimes have like a bad day, and I think we might need to allow ourselves to have that brain fog every so often. But obviously, if it starts to affect the bigger picture, how does that work? How does it affect what we do?
Yeah, I find oftentimes when we end up with brain fog, and like you said, we are all humans, and there is going to be no perfect life in which we always wake up crystal clear and focused. But I think what we also need to recognize too is that when we're looking at all these other entrepreneurs in our community, and so many of us are just so wiped out when we wake up and we go through our days and we're really tired and we get that afternoon energy drop and we're exhausted in the evening and we end up just zoning out on Netflix with our phone in our hand, because that's all we have the energy for at the end of the night. And I think we look around and we see so many other people like this that we just assume that it's normal, when I always like the idea of questioning, like, well, what could we do to improve that? Right. So like when we're looking at how it's actually affecting our businesses specifically, it's affecting how consistent we show up. And I mean, I know on the days that I've had brain fog or the days I've not slept well, I'm much more likely to be like, I'm just going to push this down the week, down the schedule. Or this is not the day. I just don't feel very creative today. My work is not very impactful. When I show up on stories or lives, or if I'm recording a podcast, like I can feel my energy is not there. And I really feel, whether we're doing written marketing or, you're showing up on video or whatever it is, that our energy is what attracts our people to us, right? Like if we can activate other people and inspire them, not only with our content, but with the vibe that we bring to our businesses, I really think that that's what creates a successful business. So showing up tired all the time, I really think it affects our consistency as well as the energy that draws people towards our business.
That makes so much sense. And yes, energy, you can feel energy. Like, it comes across even with stories and things like that. Like, yeah, you can have a script and read from it, but like your energy is what really, like you said, attracts people. It makes total sense how that could come across on your story.
And you can totally sense too when people are just showing up just to show up versus they have the energy behind what they're saying and they believe it and they love what they're doing and they feel, vibrant and healthy. Like you can definitely feel that. And I think that that's kind of what creates that consistency in showing up and people being drawn to you.
Yes, I totally hear you. So how can we eliminate brain fog and actually boost our energy? And I'm so curious about this. Like, tell me.
Yeah, well, it definitely comes down to, I always talk about 4 main areas, kind of like pillars. But what I have realized over time is that there's one pillar that is not really a pillar. It's the foundation and the base, which needs to come first. So if I'm going to talk about like the 4 areas where I usually work with people to help them, optimize and upgrade so that they're feeling a lot better, it's usually coming down to like, are we moving our bodies? I'm not talking about getting hour-long workouts in here, because I mean, we're moms, we have a lot to do. Hour-long workouts aren't going to fit in regularly, but are we taking steps during the day? Are we making an effort to move our bodies more? Are we taking time to actually unwind and de-stress and have time where we're just doing stuff for fun that's not productive, that doesn't have an output, attached to it or a result? Are we eating foods that are whole foods most of the time that make us feel good? Or are we making us, make us feel slow and like, less energy? And then the last thing, of course, which ends up being the foundation, is our sleep. I have found over and over again that sleep is one of those things that as entrepreneurs, we always like to say, yeah, it's okay. I'm just going to stay up a couple hours later because I can get this done and I'll be more productive and I won't have to do it tomorrow. But cutting out an hour or two of sleep can compromise your cognition and whole day of productivity the next day. So when we think we're gaining time by cutting into sleep specifically, we're actually taking time from our performance tomorrow. So I find over and over again that if we can optimize how our brain recovers and refreshes during sleep, it makes everything else from, getting your movement in, to eating whole foods, to staying low stress, to recovering from illness. All of that gets so much easier. And it's one of the easiest things to change because it's free and we're already doing it.
Yes. And I have to admit, I actually love sleeping. I don't like napping, but I love sleeping. But if I think back to pre-kids, pre-baby, I was one of those people. My husband would be like, "You going to bed?" "Yeah, I'm almost done." And then, yes, an hour later, you're still like on the computer, still working. And it does affect the next day. And even right now, like, because I'm trying to apply this, or I sort of think back to pre-baby and post-baby. Even right now, I go to bed when the baby goes to bed and when my other daughter goes to bed. And I feel so much better in the morning because I know that if I stay up till 10 or 11, like I used to, I don't function very well the next day. So yeah, it makes total sense. But I'm totally hearing you. We are entrepreneurs. We do push through. We kind of, want to finish this one thing and do that. And then there are people that might not sleep that well. And I think I used to be one of those people that I would push through because I was like, yeah, I've got that energy right now and I've got the brain space right now, and I would push through and compromise on my sleep. And then I would actually struggle to sleep because I'd push through.
Well, yeah, and it's the way we treat our brains in those hours before bed too, right? Like even if we are just getting an hour work done, there's so many other factors that we aren't taking into account that like the hours we will be sleeping won't be as quality. So not only are you losing in the duration, but the quality as well, right?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. Do you have any sort of tips on sleeping? Because like I said, I love sleeping, but I'm sure that there's other people that might just push through a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what the fun thing is I really got obsessed with sleep after my daughter was born. When she was about 4 months old, I became obsessed with this idea that I'm like, if my brain is working like this and I'm up every 2 hours, most people must be experiencing some level of this fogginess all the time because we're undersleeping, right? So at the time I ended up doing what I called Project Sleep. And I did it live on Instagram. And I used wearable technology. At the time, I was using a Fitbit and tracking my sleep and showing the progress in the quality of my sleep every time I made one small change. And it was something I did with a newborn. So I was showing like, look, here, I was up 2 times last night. But since I've also been implementing these other changes, look how much more deep sleep or dream sleep I'm getting, or look how much longer I'm able to stay asleep now. So one of those things that it's really important to know right off the bat is that like you can still improve your sleep, even if you have circumstances that make it feel like you're struggling with your sleep, or your sleep is out of control because you're in a new stage of motherhood, or you've got young kids that are up. So that was the first thing I think, is just realizing that there's still changes you can make and you're not hopeless.
Yeah, that's so good.
Right. But then when I really started tracking my sleep and learning about sleep and going through all my education on it, one of the most fascinating things I learned is we are not getting enough or as much sleep as we think we are. So we often think like, if I go to bed at 11 and I wake up at 7, that's 8 hours, right? So I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. And this was me before. And I used to like skip through any type of articles or Instagram stories on sleep because I thought I was getting enough sleep and it didn't apply to me. But until I started wearing a Fitbit at the time, and I started actually getting the data to my phone in the morning, I didn't know that your brain takes 20 minutes or more to fall asleep at night. your brain also wakes up at the end of every 90 to 120 minute sleep cycle, and you may not even be aware of it. Wow. And then there's the times we wake up with kids, or we have to go to the washroom, or we're waking up early in the morning. And when I look at the data from my clients, Fitbits or Oura Rings, and I love to analyze them and like color code the spreadsheets. But when I look at that, I can tell you over and over again that the average entrepreneur is spending between about an hour and an hour, 20 minutes per night awake. Now, if you go and take your 7.5 to 8 hours that you think you're getting and you subtract off what you are awake during the night, most of us are not getting enough sleep. So really understanding that difference between how much sleep am I actually getting versus how much time I'm giving myself to sleep. So if we want to be getting 7.5 hours sleep and we are the average person, we want to be in bed for at least 8.5 hours to allow our brain to go through all of the phases of sleep that make us refreshed, sharp, focused the next day.
Wow. I'm like super. Yeah, this is interesting to me because I don't know, new mum, well, not new mum, second time mum. And I slept the other day. Well, my baby slept for 5.5 hours and I woke up and I was like, I feel really good. Like I felt like I'd had enough sleep. And obviously like it was the middle of the night. So I went back to sleep. And then the next morning I was like, now I feel worse. Can you oversleep? I don't know.
It might just be that part of the quality of sleep, and depending on what time you wake up at, that can affect it, right? Because there are certain functions that happen in our brain at the early part of the night. So let's say if you're sleeping 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, and there are certain functions that happen in the later part of the night. So think, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in the early part of the night, that is when we get most of our deep restorative sleep. So think about psychologically and physically feeling refreshed from the actions, all the brain processes that happen during that time, right? So deep sleep, restorative, good for your brain, good for your physical body. Now, on the other end of the night, that's when we get the majority of our dreaming and our REM sleep. This is what helps us feel more mentally fresh and focused. So there's lots of really cool things that happen during our dreaming phase. So one example is it actually promotes creative thinking and out of the box thinking, which is fantastic for us as entrepreneurs. Yes. Like this is key to what we do and how creative we are. But it also helps us manage our emotions. If you've ever woken up and felt a little like a spitfire or a little irritated, yes. It might be because you didn't get enough dream sleep, and that's totally normal. But beyond that as well, like we are able to read other people's facial expressions and body gestures so much better when we have had enough REM sleep. And if we're working at all with a team or with clients, or if we're coaches, anything like that, like it's really important to be able to be in tune with how other people are, what they're thinking, what they're saying. And that was what makes us a lot of good consultants and coaches. So to answer what you said, it could have just been that perhaps where your sleep was fragmented through the night interrupted that maybe the dream sleep state, and that left you feeling less mentally refreshed when you woke up, even though you had gotten enough deep sleep earlier in the night. I mean, it really just depends sometimes what part of the sleep gets fragmented.
That totally makes sense because yes, the first part was 5.5 hours and then the next part was like fragmented, and that at the moment is my life, but that's okay. Yeah. We'll get through that.
And it's also so interesting because it depends on what phase of sleep you are woken up during, right? And that's one of my loves for like the idea of can we create so much consistency that we no longer need that alarm clock? Because our brains will always wake us up in like light sleep, right? But if we're woken up in the middle of the night by a bad dream, a loud noise, a baby crying, we don't get to determine what phase our brain wakes up in. So there's actually something really fascinating called sleep inertia. And when we are woken up in the middle of a dream state or a deep state, we often will feel as if we are like been hit by a truck almost. Our brains aren't working properly because we have been pulled out of the middle of a sleep cycle. So sometimes when we naturally wake up, our brains will be like, okay, we're finishing out a sleep cycle. Let's wrap this up and wake up. And those will usually be the mornings that you feel a lot better. So you could have also just been jarred out of a specific sleep state that came with that bit of a sleep inertia.
This is so fascinating, honestly.
I love sleep. It's the most interesting thing, especially when you see how it impacts nearly every area of your business, your life, who you are, how you show up, how you feel about things. It's great.
It's amazing. I'm like partly thinking about my husband too, because he gets woken up by our dogs. And I think it's mostly in the morning. And that's probably why he's grumpy sometimes.
It sounds like his REM sleep got interrupted, his dreaming.
I think so. Oh, okay. So next part, because you said you've got the 4 things. And this is another thing that I'm fascinated by, and at the moment probably not doing very well. How does food play into consistency and energy and ability to focus? And honestly, full disclaimer here, with Easter just gone, I've had way too much chocolate, and I know it affects me in a way that I feel really sort of sluggish after that. So I know that food really is an important kind of thing, but I want to know more about it. So tell me more.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right on this. And I mean, having been pregnant right now, my diet has definitely been different. I can definitely feel the difference of that. And part of me is just really excited to get back to that consistency. But when we're talking about food and how it affects your brain and your performance, there's 2 angles you go at. Part of it is what you are eating specifically, because if we are eating foods that our body is sensitive to, or it is causing damage to our gut lining, or it is causing inflammation, our guts are directly linked to our brain. So for example, I've had a client who was extremely sensitive to what are called nightshade vegetables, which are things like peppers and potatoes and things like that. And when we pulled those out just as an experiment, it was amazing how differently his body performed and how clear he was. So part of it is that there are certain foods that we are eating that don't work for us as individuals. The second part of it is looking at something called glycemic variability. And that's just a really fancy word for how stable is our blood sugar during the day. So when we eat, specifically, if we're eating a lot of foods that are carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are a big span of food, everything from vegetables to fruit, to rice, to flour, to sugar. When we eat carbohydrates, it enters our blood and causes a blood sugar spike.
Yeah.
When that blood sugar is constantly going up and down, and I'm not talking about small rolling hills, but I'm talking about what you probably experienced after the Easter chocolate, which was a massive spike in blood sugar, followed by probably an energy rush, dopamine rush. Like your body's like, this tastes amazing.
Yeah.
But what goes up comes down. And with that comes our energy and our clarity. And that constant fluctuation of blood sugar up and down and up and down and up and down really affects our ability to stay clear and focused. So what I'll often recommend is the best thing we can do is when we're looking at our food, the most of the time we want to be choosing whole foods. And the way to think about that is, did it come from the ground at one point, or did it have a mother? And if you can't answer that question looking at it, like you can't take cheesies and say whether that came from the ground or had a mother, right? So we're looking at including whole foods because they tend to have a much more leveling effect on our blood sugar. So, I mean, we've all had a giant plate of pasta, and I love food. I think there's a place for those lovely meals and things like that. I'm just very strategic around when I eat them. So for example, if I know that I have a full work day, maybe I have some stuff I want to get done in the afternoon, or an interview, or I'm recording a podcast, what I'm not going to do is have a very high carb lunch, because that is going to cause that blood sugar fluctuation and leave me feeling fatigued, tired, low energy, and foggy. So I'm very strategic with how I use food for my energy. And I know that if I'm choosing whole foods more often, it is going to help with blood sugar stability, which keeps me focused.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I hadn't even thought about it that way. I actually, when I was pregnant, had gestational diabetes. So I've been obviously learning more about carbs and sugars and all of that. And I had to keep it down. And I felt pretty good throughout my pregnancy because I had to watch my diet because it was all diet controlled. There was no insulin or anything. So it was more looking at what I was putting into my mouth and into my body to make sure that I didn't have too many carbs that would spike my blood sugar. So fascinating. I'm loving
Yeah,
this.
and it's also super interesting when we talk about the food sleep relationship, because I mean, many of us at the end of the day will have a late dinner, or will, sit down with a bowl of chips or some popcorn or whatever that treat is, because we had a day that maybe was exhausting or whatever that might be. But if you look at the research on how eating that close to bed actually affects your sleep, when we sleep, if we want to get those deep restorative effects and feel really refreshed the next day, we want our heart rate to come down and our blood pressure to come down so that we can go into that recovery process. But when we're eating within 2 to 3 hours, and I usually think even up to 4 sometimes of bedtime, our heart rate goes up. Our blood pressure goes up, our digestion kicks in, and it actually delays how long it takes for our body to start relaxing. And then beyond that, if we're eating foods that are processed for the most part, what might happen is we get that blood sugar spike, and our bodies aren't as good at dealing with blood sugar in the evening as the morning. So if you had like a banana in the morning, your body would deal with it much better than having a banana at night, because that's just the nature of how our body processes carbohydrates. So going to sleep with high blood sugar causes an increase in cortisol. So if you find that you have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, and you're waking up and your brain is going through your to-do list and you can't stop thinking and it feels like your brain is on fire, how could I possibly get back to sleep? It may just be that you're eating too close to bedtime or eating too many carbohydrates for dinner. And carbohydrates aren't bad, but we just need to be strategic about them.
Yeah, that's what I learned during my pregnancy as well. And I'm just sitting here going, oh, maybe that's why my daughter is like an Energizer bunny right after dinner. Like, calm down, we need to go to bed soon. Makes total sense. Okay. Next part of how you work with your clients, stress. And I don't know, I hear a lot of people talk about stress, and I'm not a naturally stressed out kind of I don't know, stress is not something that I experience very often. I know maybe I'm pretty lucky, but I want to talk about it with you because I know that is another part. And I have had stress in like work times when things all seem a little bit too much, but overall, maybe I've just learned to cope with it. But can you share some simple strategies to keep our stress under control? Because I know that is another thing that affects everything, doesn't it? Like our gut, our sleep, and our performance pretty much.
Oh, absolutely everything. You nailed it there. But I have a different view on stress. So a lot of the times, like if you scroll with Instagram, how many times you'll see posts on self-care and have wind down, and like it really focuses more on like those holistic, do more yoga, take more time for you, have more days off. Like that is what we're used to seeing. Yeah. But if we're going to get into like actually the science of stress is not something we want to eliminate, because it also is what creates that focus that we want. I mean, that is a state of stress, right? Like, so the goal is not to eliminate stress, but to be resilient when we are stressed out. I mean, given the natures of running a business, there's always going to be a link that will break. Always. Yes. There will always be someone on social media that tells me that my most recent reel is cringe, because that is just the nature of putting yourself out there in business, right? And it's totally normal to have a stress response. I think where that disconnect is being able to consciously choose to pull yourself out of stress. And it is that resiliency that we miss out on. So I often look at like stress doesn't have to come in just the form that we expect, meaning feeling overwhelmed in our business, because I'm like you, I wouldn't qualify myself as a stressed out person. However, our bodies don't just experience mental stress. There is emotional stress. If you're having a month where you're struggling with your finances or your relationship, we have nutritional stress. Back to talking about if you eat something that your body gets inflamed by, your body perceives that as a stress. Or what about the idea of overtraining for someone who exercises too much? These are all different ways our bodies can be stressed out. And it doesn't always have to come down to having something trigger us in our business. So when I'm really looking at how we can bring our bodies back to a neutral state, we want to always think of creating what I like to think of as the edge. So a lot of us entrepreneurs, we do lean more to the doing, the planning, the organizing, the spreadsheeting, everything like that. That does tend to be how we lean. But then there's also the other side of the spectrum. So if that's human doing, there's human being, which is like being present with our family and enjoying and what we see as de-stressing. Now, I think the key in that is to find that perfect balance where we feel challenged, but not bored. And it's not bordering into stress. So I find for me, if I lean my energy, for me personally, 70% into doing and planning and organizing and spend 30% of my time recovering, relaxing, spending time present, that's when I feel my best. And I think it's playing with that balance and looking at, like in my workday, for example, if I put all of my client calls back to back to back to back to back, how do I feel at the end of that? Do I feel at that 70% mark? Probably not. So what that teaches me is I need to insert small bits of time during my day, whether that's, lunch that's actually not at my desk, or maybe I need to take a couple minutes between calls to actually just center my breathing, check what muscles in my body are feeling tight, like actually check in with yourself. How am I feeling right now? Am I feeling tense? Have I stopped breathing deeply? Can I slow down? So doing that check-in with yourself during the day of like, how's my energy right now? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Why? And how can I slow that back down? How can I intentionally be resilient and pull myself out of a bit of that, almost that sympathetic system, like fight or flight response I'm feeling?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And you make it sound so simple, and it is so simple, like literally just stopping, thinking, how am I feeling? Because I think our natural tendency is just go, work, do. And I love it. That like these are such, simple little things that we can do. It's just stop, think, and even like lunch away from your desk. Well,
I know, what a concept, right?
But I know.
It's so interesting though. Like when I often find that one of the biggest pushbacks that I'll often get of like, I don't want to go to bed on time. Like I want to just stay up. I want to watch Netflix at the end of the night. That's my me time. That's my decompression time. Kids are down for bed. That's the only time I get for me. What do you mean I have to go to sleep? Like that is something I hear that all the time. And you know what the interesting thing is, after really looking in detail at what is going on when we have this thought process, it's because we're so exhausted from being human doings all day, from like staying in meetings and emailing and responding and creating and posting. And we stay in that energy all day without those micro breaks that we talked about. So we get to the end of the day and we just want to zone out. So we end up choosing activities that don't make us feel the way we want to feel, which is restored and refreshed. Now, I love Netflix. I find there's definitely a place for watching TV and stuff like that, but we use it as a way to escape how exhausted we are, usually while also scrolling our phone, and use that instead of getting the restorative sleep. So one of the things I also like to, suggest is ask yourself if what you're doing with your evening time is refreshing and restorative, because that's often the answer. And I say, what are you trying to achieve with that me time? I just want to just have some time for me. Well, is it making you feel the way you want to feel, or are you just as exhausted at the end of it? Because if you are if you're not getting what you want out of that time, you're going to want more and more and more of it. And usually what that comes at the expense of is, eating less healthy foods, staying up too late, feeling stressed out. So really looking at what are you getting out of that time? And if it's not giving you what you want, try something different. Go for a walk, read a book, something that gives you that feeling you want.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. All of this. Thank you. Wow. I just got so much to think about right now.
So fun.
There's this, so many things. And I think you kind of touched on it a little bit already. It's like, people not wanting to do certain things. And that it makes total sense. I'm sometimes like that. I often go to bed, like I said, I go to bed with my kids right now because that's how I get the best sleep, I find. And sometimes I'm like, I really want to read a book, and I know that when I read a book I don't stop. I'll just read the whole. I've done that in the past.
Gotta read more boring books.
Oh yeah, maybe like my husband. He drops the Kindle in his head when he's reading his book. But no, I've done it in the past where it's like 2 a.m. and I'm like, oh no, and like So I guess reading books is kind of like my Netflix.
And you know what the interesting thing is too, is like, I love reading books as an example, because that's how individual we are. For one person, that'll keep your brain engaged and you will just stay, you will stay in that almost like more alert state. And for some people, like you said, your husband, he falls fast asleep. So I think part of it is too, is experimenting, like, what are the activities that make me feel good? Do I want to, paint? Do I want to do a puzzle? Do I want to, spend some time breathing? Do I want to write? Do I, want to do some meditation? There's so many options to experiment with.
But then knowing your limits, because that's, I guess, the issue.
I have a hard 9 p.m. limit on reading, because I've been in a string right now where I have read 5 books that I have rated 5 stars in a row, and this never happens. And I'm almost like upset about it because it is disrupting my sleep. So I had to put like a solid 9 p.m. alarm of like, Tanessa, go to sleep. Yeah. I get the books are good, but our sleep's been a little messy for the last couple of weeks.
that seems to happen to me. That's why I now, like, when I go to bed, I'm like, no, I'm going to go to sleep. I'll read the book tomorrow. I can read it tomorrow. I don't need to read it right now. Having that limit on it. Is there anything else that you kind of can add? Because there's so much to discover. Are there any other tips, tricks, any things that, I don't know, you hear over and over? And
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that like I do end up hearing a lot is this idea that when I get there, then I'll have time for.
I love that. Yes, that's half my brain.
Right? It's like, just when I get through this launch, when I reach 5-figure months, when I hit 6-figure years, when I can outsource this, when I can hire a team, when my kids are older, when all this, then I will have time for my health. I hear that all of the time. And that's often why, like, none of us intend when we start a business to neglect our health. It's usually something that happens so slow and it's over time and we don't realize it. And so we develop this dichotomy of thinking where it's either I have my health or a successful business, and I could not possibly have both right now. And I love to challenge that thinking with this. One of the reasons I say to start with sleep is because what it does for your brain clarity and your focus. So imagine this. Imagine right now your sleep is creating a performance level in your brain where you're showing up at 50% of your peak capacity. Well, what if by boosting the quality of your sleep and getting enough, having everything feel focused and clear, that you could take your brain up to 90% of peak capacity? Then when you show up at your desk tomorrow, what might normally take you 6 hours takes you 5 or 4.5. You have now created an hour or an hour and a half that you don't have to fill with more business productivity. You could choose to use half an hour of that to go out on a walk. You could choose to make a healthy meal or look up new recipes. You could choose to, learn a new skill that helps you unwind, like meditation. So I love the idea that instead of thinking that your business and your health are competing, how can you use your health to make you more effective and efficient in your business so that you have time to continue layering in slowly over time the health habits that are going to give you that longevity and focus in your business? Because 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what is the energy I want in my business? And I mean, if anybody listening has been sick over the last year or two, and you're laying on the couch, the last thing you're thinking of is, oh my gosh, I have to make a post on Instagram. You're just like, I just want to feel better. I just want this headache to go away. I just want to stop feeling so nauseous. All you want is your health. So we want to set ourselves up for the longevity of our business so that we have our health, so that we are not ever in a position where our business can no longer take our focus as well.
Yes, right. That's completely spot on. I love it. And it makes a total sense. And I can recognize a little bit of myself in that. And here comes baby. He's part of the podcast.
It's so cute.
It is
I love it.
Cute. Business with a baby. Hey, I love it because it's almost part of how I have been operating a little bit as well. It's like, I'll get to that when blah, blah, blah. And yeah, wake up call when, I don't know, when your health kind of, takes a turn or something like that, then you're like, no, I need to do this right now. And I love that you say start with sleep, because you are then having more energy, more focus, and you are freeing up time. That is like, I'm like, why wouldn't we do this? Like, it's so simple. Like, sleep, anybody can sleep.
And we're already doing it and it's free.
Exactly. I love it. That's amazing. All right. Well, given that little bubby is waking up, we should really wrap up. I have 2 more questions, and I ask this of everybody. I'd love to know what you are curious about right now.
Okay, I'm going to totally be a nerd here. I have become obsessed recently with how light color and light intensity affects our brain and our health. So, I mean, we always hear things like get outside, expose your eyes to light in the morning, it boosts your energy and all kinds of stuff like that. So I've actually really gotten nerdy this week and downloaded a light meter on the phone to see how much light is in my office. How much light am I getting if I'm reading before bed, and watching actually how that affects the quality of my sleep or how I'm feeling during the day. And if I spend like 10, if I spend like 10 minutes outside in the morning with my eyes exposed to really bright light, how do I feel during the day? What's my focus like? So that's what I'm experimenting with right now.
Oof, I love that. That is really, really good. And hang on.
I love it though. It's such a real moment hearing him cry. It's just like, we're moms. We're doing this, He's
the cutest. All right, off we go. I really think that's interesting with the whole light thing, because we moved to Tasmania last year, and we're at the southern end of the world, and you're at the northern end of the world. You probably have a similar thing where where it's dark early in winter and you might be getting less light during the day. So that is a really fascinating kind of thing, the whole life and what's going on. And you've like opened my mind to a lot of things. I could literally talk about this for pick your brain for ages. But if you had an extra $1,000 in your marketing budget, what would you spend it on?
I love the idea of using it to run ads to drive traffic to my podcast episodes, but doing it in such a way where we can just create like a viewing audience. And then I would actually use that to retarget with some other type of content. And I think that that's what I would use it on, because I love doing my podcast and getting eyes on it in a way that's value up front with content. And then I always have the call to action in the podcast, right? And if not that, then you have a list of people that engaged with your podcast that are great for retargeting.
I think that's brilliant. Awesome. All right. Well, while he's like grumbling on my lap, that's the end of the podcast for this week. If you have any questions about eliminating brain fog with biohacking, head to TanessaShears.com. I will also add this to the show notes so you can find the links. A really big thank you to you, Tanessa, for joining this podcast episode. It was really lovely talking to you and learning so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I always love talking about all this stuff that just makes us better at what we do.
Oh, well, there's a lot of homework for me. And thanks to you for listening. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you heard the podcast. Your review will help others find the show and learn more about the amazing world of online marketing. And don't forget to check out the show notes for this week's episode at newschoolofmarketing.com, where you can learn more about Tanessa, check out useful links, download free resources, and leave a comment about the show.